Welcome to an hour of HealthMade Radio. HealthMade is a community for natural health seekers where we educate people about common health conditions and share extensive research on the most effective natural health treatments and promote legislation that protects our health freedoms. A core concept belief is in the innate intelligence and healing power of the body, and if properly supported spiritually, emotionally, and nutritionally, it can find its way back to health. HealthMade Radio will bring information from integrative health experts throughout the world. Check us out at healthmade.co. Health is what you make it. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt, and I will be your host. Today's guest is Professor Yehuda Shoenfeld. Professor Yehuda Shoenfeld is the founder and head of the Yablodovich Center for Autoimmune Diseases at the Sheba Medical Center, which is affiliated to the Sackler Faculty of Medicine and Tel Aviv University in Israel. Professor Shoenfeld's clinical and scientific works focus on autoimmune and rheumatic disease, and he has published more than 1,900 papers in journals such as New England Journal of Medicine, Nature, The Lancet, Cancer, and so on. Professor Shoenfeld is on the editorial boards of 43 journals in the fields of rheumatology and autoimmunity, and is the founder and the editor of the IMAJ, Israel Medical Association Journal, the representative journal of science and medicine in the English language in Israel, and also is the founder and editor of Autoimmunity Reviews, and co-editor of the Journal of Autoimmunity. For the past 20 years, Yehuda has been the editor of Harfot, the Israel Journal in Medicine. Professor Shoenfeld received the Euler Prize in 2005 in Vienna, Austria. In UC Davis, United States, Professor Shoenfeld received the Nelson's Prize for Humanity and Science in 2008. He has recently awarded Life Contribution Prize in Internal Medicine in Israel 2012, as well as the ACR Master Award in 2013. Professor Shoenfeld, it's such a tremendous honor to have you on the show today. Everything that you've done in immunology and all the information that you brought out. You know, one of the things that you really specialize in is autoimmunity. What is autoimmunity in your eyes?
Autoimmunity, it's when the immune system actually does not function properly to excel or to get rid of bacteria and viruses which invade us, or let's say cancer, and suddenly attacks our own body constituents, which in the army terminology, it's called friendly fire.
And why because there's several different kinds of autoimmunity. You have like Hashimoto's would be, for instance, autoimmunity towards your thyroid, and Crohn's, to intestinal tract. Why do an individual develop one versus the other?
So first of all, there are no different kinds of autoimmunity. What you referred to are different diseases, and there are about 80 different autoimmune diseases. In some of them, the immune system attacks only one organ or one system or one cell, like with the thyroid. And in other, it may attack multiple organs, like in systemic lupus erythematosus, and that's why it's called systemic. So these are the different kinds of autoimmune disease. And why the immune system attacks our own organs is due to the fact that it is overstimulated, and we have to understand that almost all autoimmune diseases are genetics. There are many genes which will make you to be prone to develop an autoimmune diseases. And there are other genetic markers like HLA. These are markers which appear on our many cells and are inherited from the father and the mother. Now, when you look for characterize those who develop autoimmune diseases, it's that those people have a very aggressive immune system. And this aggressive immune system gives actually advantage to those people in evolution because they could fight better external invaders like cholera or coronavirus, etc. But at the same time, if they are exposed to something from the environment which overstimulated, it will change its direction, and instead of fighting and attacking foreign invaders, will attack our own constituents and organs. So let's take two cars, one which is a mini minor, which drives in 50 miles per hour, and you throw a stone on the mini minor, it will deviate from the road, but will return very quickly to the road. But if you take a Porsche car or a Lamborghini, which drives 300 or 200 miles per hour, and you throw a stone, it will upside down and turn upside down, and actually in this case the immune system will turn against our own body. So basically we need genetics, and therefore all autoimmune diseases run in families, and always you can find somebody else who has one of the 80 autoimmune diseases, not necessarily the same one. And the second is you need the environmental factor which will stimulate the immune system, which is already a priori overstimulated. So what are the factors in the environment which can overstimulate the immune system? For instance, infectious agents like the EB virus, Epstein-Barr virus, which is a virus which is responsible for the kissing disease, infectious mononucleosis, but also is responsible for at least 33 different autoimmune diseases. There are additional factors which you can stimulate the immune system, like the stress, or, for instance, silicone implants, which are foreign substances which was found to stimulate the immune system constantly as far as the silicone implants remain in our body. So to your question, what makes you to develop autoimmune disease? It's genetic tendency and environmental factors. There is one additional factor which is extremely important, and this is women at the childbearing ages. Women have a very aggressive immune system, and therefore it may explain why 83% of all autoimmune diseases affect women, young women at the childbearing ages.
So it almost seems like an evolutionary advantage that we had that was needed many years ago, hundreds of years ago, and maybe thousands of years ago, now have turned against us, and now it's starting to look more like a weakness, our ability then to defend and repair ourselves at a faster rate. So now when we have less stressors, I would say, we have less, we're not fighting the saber-toothed tiger anymore, and we don't need to repair as quickly. The immune system kind of overdoes its thing. Am I correct with that?
In a way.
So you're talking, because a lot of people then have genetic tendencies. Can they have the genetic tendencies and still not develop the autoimmune disease?
Because they were not still exposed to that stimulus that I mentioned, which has to play in concert with the tendency to induce the autoimmune diseases. There are stages in developing autoimmune disease. When the immune system is stimulated in a way that I mentioned before. At the beginning, you will develop only autoantibodies, which are the missiles of the immune system to attack our own organs. Antibodies are those missiles which are going to attack the foreign invaders. Autoantibodies will attack our own antigens, which are called autoantigen. So at the beginning, there will be a production of autoantibodies. This does not mean a disease. A disease is when you have clinical manifestations. It takes some time. The incubation time may be between 10 and even 20 years, and sometimes a short time of only 1 month. And then you will develop an autoimmune disease when the tissues or the organs are afflicted. You will develop signs and symptoms for each one of the typical autoimmune diseases. If the stimulus, the external stimulus of the immune system will continue, eventually you may develop a cancer of the immune system, which is called lymphoma. And this is the reason why patients with autoimmune diseases may develop lymphoma at a higher incidence than, for instance, people who do not have actually autoimmune diseases.
We're going to take a quick break. I want to ask some more questions about the connection between autoimmunity and lymphoma. We'll be right back. You're listening to Health Made Radio. I'm here with Professor Shoenfeld. Welcome back to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Professor Shoenfeld, and we're discussing autoimmunity and its connection with cancer, and also the impact of adjuvants that we've introduced in modern society. So you were talking about autoimmunity and how it can then actually lead to lymphoma. So I look upon autoimmunity as an overactive immune system, and then look upon cancer as a weakness in the immune system. So they seem opposing to me. How can one shift to the other?
That's, first of all, a wonderful question. So it seems like there is a conflict of interest between the autoimmune diseases and cancer, but not necessarily, but I will explain. First of all, there are autoimmune phenomenon and diseases which are called paraneoplastic, which means there is a tumor, there is a cancer, and the cancer itself is the cause of the autoimmune disease because it stimulates the immune system. So once you take the cancer, in few cases, the patient will completely recover from the autoimmune disease. On the other hand, as I mentioned before, in many of the autoimmune diseases, you have an increased incidence of cancer. There is one autoimmune disease called dermatomyositis and myositis, which is very frequently associated with a hidden tumor, a hidden cancer, and therefore in the screening and the workout of these patients, it's mandatory to look for cancer of the ovary or cancer of the stomach and so forth. But your question was much more important. And in the last 2 years, we have even a better understanding of the, so to speak, the conflict of interest between cancer and autoimmune diseases. And it's a kind of a proof of concept to what I have explained at the beginning of my work. So the assumption was and is that cancer may develop due to the fact that the immune system is not enough aggressive against the cancer to eradicate it. So we know that when the immune system acts, for instance, if a bacteria enters in our body, eventually it has to stop working, not to waste weapon, not to be continuously working. And therefore we have checkpoints in our immune system, and we can call them breaks, which actually terminate the reaction of the immune system when it is not necessary anymore. So two people, Ellison and Honjo, came with the idea that if we will unleash the immune system by blocking the checkpoints, we will be able to overcome cancer. They won the Nobel Prize 2 years ago, 2018, by describing this mechanism and generating biological weapons, which are also antibodies, which block the checkpoints. This therapy is called checkpoint inhibitors. And by employing this therapy, they were able, or we are able today, to overcome, which means overcome, almost cure, several kinds of cancer that before we were not able to manipulate or to suppress them. A great advantage to humanity, and there is no question that they deserve the Nobel Prize. So what they did actually, by their method, they have unleashed the blockade, the brakes of the immune system, and they let the immune system to be very aggressive. And therefore, this immune system eradicated a significant number of untreatable cancer. But the toll for this blocking and actually letting the immune system to be very aggressive is development of autoimmune diseases. And this is a very nice proof of concept for both the conflict of, I would say, interest between cancer and autoimmunity. However, just to explain to the public that the development of autoimmune diseases is indeed a toll and a tax and a payment, but it's still worthwhile to have this autoimmune disease rather than the untreated cancer, which will lead very soon to your death. And luckily enough, these autoimmune diseases are quite treatable by common treatments and can be even stopped, which means cured. So I hope that I was able to explain the conflict between the aggressiveness of the immune system, cancer, and the induction of autoimmune diseases.
Yeah, you did beautiful. Because I know there's a difference between you have what's it called? You have the humoral versus cellular immunity, and the cellular immunity within the cancer is very low. So there we're talking about the low immune system. But then the humoral, it's like the cancer, like you're saying, the cancer is using the immune system for its own advantage so that it can spread and move forward. And so then the immune system is activated outside, using the inflammatory processes to drive itself.
It's right that the immune system is classified into two arms. One is the missiles, the antibodies, which their structure is like the letter Y. And in the open arms of the Y, it binds either to the bacteria or to the viruses or to cells and can act, suppress, manipulate the cancer. But the second arm is the cells, and therefore it's called cellular immunity. And these cells, which their name is lymphocytes, the cells of the immune system. I call them the tanks. So we have missiles and we have tanks. In many occasions, both arms play in concert to cure disease, to eliminate invading organs, to fight cancer, and so forth.
So with the new drug that they found 2 years ago, or they received the Nobel Prize 2 years ago, they were able to then dismiss some of the cloaking device or protection device that the immune system has, or that the cancer has, so that the immune system more efficiently can then recognize the cancer and fight the cancer.
Correct.
Oh, wonderful. Well,
you even explained it in a better English than mine.
Well, yours is based on much more knowledge than what I have. So,
thank you. You are very kind to me.
We're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Professor Shoenfeld. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Professor Shoenfeld. You mentioned a word called adjuvant. What is an adjuvant, and how are we exposed to adjuvant? You were talking a little bit about silicone breast implants, which most people thought were just inert, that they had really no reaction whatsoever, and therefore shouldn't have any kind of impact on the immune system. But you're saying that is incorrect.
Adjuvants comes from the Latin word adjuvare, to help. And this means anything that helps the immune system, stimulate the immune system. And therefore, adjuvants, for instance, are used in vaccines in which you are using a dead bacteria or a synthetic virus. Actually, adjuvants exist constitutively in the skeleton of the viruses and the bacteria. And this helps to stimulate our immune system and to raise defense or actually attack against them. This is the basis of immunity. When you are using a dead bacteria or a synthetic virus or synthetic parts of the virus, you need to add the adjuvant to enhance the reaction of the immune system against these constituents, because they are devoid of the natural constitutive adjuvant that this infecting agent has. So the adjuvants are part of the vaccines and part of the kingdom of bacteria and viruses when they attack us. With the silicone implants, which started in 1970s, basically in Japan, they have selected the silicone for two reasons. One, because of the constituents of the silicone, which remind the human flesh. And second, because they believed very incorrectly, mistakenly, that the silicone is, as you mentioned, inert to the immune system. Already in those days, they have known, there were papers, there were studies showing that the silicone is actually acting as an adjuvant, very strong stimulant of the immune system. If you inject the silicone into mice who are genetically prone to develop lupus, one autoimmune disease, the silicone will enhance the development of the disease. So it was an adjuvant, an enhancer. And for one reason or another, they have neglected or didn't pay attention to it, and they continued with the implants, the silicone implants in the breast. And immediately after starting to implant the silicone, there were papers popping up not of one case or two, but of series of cases of developing peculiar clinical manifestation which remind autoimmune diseases, but in many cases also a well-characterized autoimmune condition like scleroderma or rheumatoid arthritis and so forth. They have accumulated, and eventually the FDA decided to abandon the silicone implants and withdrew the silicone from the market. But there was a big pressure, most probably of plastic surgeon societies and companies, mainly silicone producers, and the FDA raised the moratorium and mentioned that he or the institute will allow the continuation of the implants in condition that the companies will supply clinical data after 2 years, which they did not. And meanwhile, the silicone continued to be implanted in breast of young women. What happened later on was again that many papers and series of patients accumulated to indicate that there are panoply of clinical manifestation, which I will mention in a minute. And eventually, we did a study on 20,000 silicone implant women compared to 100,000 control women matched for age and sex. And we were able to show that each one of the 8 different autoimmune diseases that we were looking for were 10, 8, 6 times more prevalent in the silicone implantee in comparison to the controls. In parallel, what has happened, there were many papers indicating that in those silicone implant women, a peculiar cancer of the immune system has developed, which is called lymphoma, or we will name it even more precisely, large B-cell lymphoma. This specific tumor, cancer, lymphoma, has appeared only in only in breast of women with silicone implants, and only in the vicinity to the silicone. What is the vicinity of the silicone? Actually, as another evidence that the silicone stimulates the immune system is the capsule which the body develops to protect against the silicone. And this fibrous capsule, which contains also cells, is the site of development of the lymphoma, of the cancer. Moreover, it has been found that when the silicone implant is intact, the capsule of the silicone itself is not ruptured. Still, the silicone is bleeding, sweating. It is discharged from the implant and enters the blood system as well as the lymph system. It has been found that this silicone can reside in the inguinal lymph nodes in the groin. So eventually, silicone represents a classical way of developing autoimmune disease. Namely, you have women, young women at the childbearing ages, which carry the marker, the genetic marker that I mentioned at the beginning of my discussion, to have an aggressive immune system, in addition of being young women with already aggressive immune system. And you expose them to an external implant, which has the ability to stimulate aggressively the immune system. So it's not surprising that they would develop autoimmune disease. And therefore, it's not also surprising that once you explant the silicone implants, these women, by and large, recover from all their manifestations. When I say by and large, it's 86% of them. Why 14% do not recover? Is it because of the time that the silicone resided in their body? Is it because it ruptured? Is it because it already stimulated and the horses actually ran out from the stable? But this is another proof of concept of overstimulation of the immune system, which leads to autoimmunity, as well as if it continues constantly or continuously, it may lead to the cancer of the immune system, namely lymphoma.
What a crime to all these women that were told that it's safe and inert, and then ending up with all these diseases. We're going to take a quick break. You're listening to HealthMade Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Professor Shoenfeld. He's one of, I would say, international leading immunologists. We'll be right back. Welcome back to HealthMade Radio. I am here with Professor Shoenfeld. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. So we were talking about silicone breast implants, but then you also have then saline. Is that different? Obviously, you don't have any silicone in that, correct?
I have to say that I didn't hear. Can you raise your voice, please?
Absolutely. So
Remember that I am over the ocean.
You're all the way in Israel.
Your voice is fading when it comes to the Holy Land.
Oh. I love it. Yeah, you have to have the authority of God on the mountaintop when you speak in Israel.
Correct.
So
actually, in Israel, the talk to God is a local phone call. It's not a long distance.
See, yeah, I love it. It's a whole lot cheaper. So the question was, a lot of women then do have saline breast implants instead of silicone. Is that different? Is the outcome different? Are they safer?
First of all, when you have a saline implants, they are loaded into a capsule of silicone. So it's not pure saline. It's contained in a saline membrane, saline capsule. And this is the capsule which comes in contact with the body components and the immune system. Actually, I would like this to take advantage of that and to mention that the surface is so important because in some cases, a rough surface was offered by the silicone producers. And it has been found that this rough surface, which was supposed to fix better the silicone in the body, is actually worse, or I would say a better inducer of the tumor, of the cancer of the immune system. And therefore, the company has to withdraw this kind of implants from the market. So there is no completely saline implants. And actually today I got a study for review from Poland, a large number of women with saline implants, so to speak, which developed the same syndrome that I have coined many years back, the Asia syndrome, the autoimmune syndrome induced by adjuvants. And those people develop the characteristic manifestations that we have described and delineated many years back, which entail, among other, cognitive impairment, memory deficits, Severe fatigue, when I say severe fatigue, is not when you are tired at the evening after work or you interviewing somebody from the Holy Land. It's when you cannot wake up in the morning. You are sucked back to the bed. And there are additional manifestations, which is dry mouth and dry ears. There is defects in sight and in hearing loss and tinnitus, noise, tingling in the ear, defects in sweat, and widespread pain, which reminds fibromyalgia. There are additional aspects like in the intestinal system or the urinary system. Today, due to our revelation of the specific autoantibodies in the blood, we have an explanation for all those manifestations, including the hearing loss. These autoantibodies can bind to the free ending of the nerves and cause also a phenomenon which is called small fiber neuropathy. The problem of these women was until now that all their tests, regular screening tests, were interpreted as normal. And therefore, eventually they ended with psychiatrists prescribing them antidepressive and drugs similar to Cipralex and so forth. Now we have the two objective parameters, the skin biopsy of the leg that you can determine the small fiber neuropathy and the autoantibodies that can be detected in the blood. And therefore, today it's not anymore enigmatic.
That's amazing. So in essence, it's like an autoimmune disease of the nervous system because you have the antibodies and binding to the nerve endings.
In a way, yes.
And so we were talking about then the adjuvant being silicone from the breast implant, but I know you've also been very outspoken in regards to aluminum as an adjuvant, that currently exists in our vaccine, and also especially, all the horrible effect that we've seen from the HPV vaccine. Can you expand a little bit about aluminum and how it functions as an adjuvant?
Aluminum is an adjuvant. It's one of the best adjuvants ever developed. It's cheap and it's very effective. It is used in the industry for more than 100 years. It stimulates the immune system very aggressively and very effectively. Therefore, if you emulsify it with the dead bacteria and the synthetic particles of viruses, etc., it is a very effective vaccine. And therefore, it can induce a protection against those viruses or bacteria, which means that vaccines are a very valuable invention which would have granted Edward Jenner most probably a Nobel Prize in the 17th centuries. But Nobel was not born by then. Having said that, as I've explained in the beginning of my talk, if these adjuvants may meet somebody who can carry an aggressive immune system, a genetic preponderance, it might, and that's not very frequent, it might induce autoimmune manifestation. This was recognized by the American system, and therefore those who can show that they have developed autoimmune disease following a vaccine, they can claim for compensation from a specific court in Washington, which was instituted by the government in 1996, following giving the immunity to the producers of vaccines. In the United States, you cannot sue the producer of the vaccines because I believe that the government has understood that if you will enable it and you will vaccinate billions of people, there will be some who will develop side effects, and then they will class claim the vaccine producers. Therefore, the government has granted immunity to these companies and decided that the government will take responsibility for those people who were, so to speak, victims or incidental victims of the vaccine, which by itself is quite rare. Having said that, since the court was established, it gave almost $4 billion as compensation. There are rules and requests how to show that indeed the vaccine caused these side effects. I mention again that it's quite rare. By the way, I didn't mention also before that the induction of lymphoma by the silicone implants is also quite rare, and currently it is estimated to affect 1 out of 2,200 women. So we are not talking about a very common manifestation, but about quite rare manifestations.
So it almost though seems to make sense and to do some kind of a screening for individuals if they are genetically prone to autoimmune conditions, that maybe they should not be given adjuvants to push that immune system further?
You have taken the words from my mouth. We have 2 papers. For instance, one of the papers is who should not be silicone implanted. Actually, since we have written this paper and we mentioned the genetic risk factor in this case, with the silicone implants, I have changed my mind, and I don't think that women should be implanted with silicone implants. After we have realized this historical medical mistake, since we know that it's a foreign body in our body, it stimulates the immune system. You have to change the silicone implants every 6, 7, 8 years. It's not forever, as some plastic surgeon tells the women, and the women believes that it's forever and so forth. So I've changed it. But what you are talking about is personalized medicine, namely to avoid side effects and to avoid disaster. And indeed, my dream is that in the future, every subject will have like a credit card in which inside all his initial and complete workout of his body constituents will be implanted. And when he goes to physician or to a medical institute, one can see immediately what are his genetic preponderance. And therefore, if he is at risk, we should avoid or at least discuss it with him. The risk is not 100%. So it might be that the subject will decide to take the risk. But this is called personalized medicine. This credit card of many data about the subject is not easy to install. And there is a reason why still it was not practiced, because it has a lot of ethical issues. Who will be able to read this information? Will there be any information which will determine, for instance, your employment. Is it possible that your employer will ask to have the details of this credit card, and then if he sees some kind of risk factor, he will say, okay, I don't want to employ you. So there are still problems, ethical problems as other problems, which will have to be solved before this kind of personal medicine will be able to be implemented in a routine way.
Yeah, I fully agree with you there. All the ethical issues that comes along with holding the health information of individuals. So I would assume, though, also that what you're saying about the screening in regards to silicone implants would apply to even a strong adjuvant like aluminum. So, for instance, if an individual is genetically prone then for a strong inflammatory reaction or autoimmune condition, that maybe they should be given the choice whether they want to have the vaccine or not.
Yes, but there are also additional ways to solve the problem. The question is whether we should dwell into research of developing novel adjuvants that might be, I would say, less strong, but at the same time quite effective. I know that what I said now is an oxymoron, but there are ways to consider different stimulus of the immune system which will not be involved with such an aggressive reaction. That's one of the ways. Maybe we should reduce the amount of the aluminum rather than increase the concentration of the aluminum. So there are many ways to think in the future and to discuss and to improve the vaccines, which are a fantastic means of protection and prevention of infectious diseases. But the way that you ignore this issue and you say, no, it does not cause any harm, is the bad way. And therefore, the classical way currently in the world is to disclaim or discredit people who raise these issues, and I would say to close their mouths. And I've written several times that this physician should have the freedom to express their thought and actually to inform if they detect side effects in their patients.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I fully agree that we should have the ability to improve. I mean, not that vaccines are bad, because they have helped in so many different ways. It is the how they are being administered, how they're being done, and instead of just ignoring the fact and to push science forward to improve it in a way to make them safe.
Yes, I agree with you too.
Well, Dr. Shoenfeld, Professor Shoenfeld, it's truly been an honor to have you on the show, and I know you have a very busy schedule, and I appreciate you bringing all this information to my listeners. It's extremely valuable information, and thank you for everything that you're doing in your field.
It was my pleasure, and I thank you for your wonderful question, which raised me to explain, and I hope to distribute knowledge among people. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That is it for today. You're listening to HealthMade Radio. Remember, check us out at healthmade.co. Health is what you make it.